Hello everybody, welcome back. It's Steve here with part 23 of our Trumpeter 1/200 scale HMS Hood build. In this part I want to concentrate on the mid-deck barriers, and I think that's all I'll be able to do this week. I've got other things to do around the house, and it's COVID jab week as well, so in the UK some of us have got to travel quite a way to get to the vaccination centres, so it'll take a full day out to do that, but it's something that I'm not going to pass over. And I've got other stuff to do around the house, so I think there's only a couple of days modelling time this week. One day I'll spend building the two barriers. They're a fairly complex structure to put together, all in etched brass. So we'll do that on one of the days, and on the other day I'll hopefully try and get them fitted to the sides of the ship. So it's the first time really in quite a long time that I've only been able to do a couple of days, but I always like to make a little bit of progress regardless of what I've got to do around the house or with other jobs. And I know that a lot of people, a lot of subscribers anticipate the videos coming out now on Friday evening, so I don't want to let anybody down, so I will get some stuff done this week. The first thing I'm going to do is get over to the bench and we'll get those mid-deck barriers built up. I'll go through the construction for those, then later on I can come back and fit them hopefully to the model itself. So we'll get over to the bench, let's get those barriers put together. Okay, this is the assembly that we're going to be tackling this week. So there's quite a few pieces to this, and the fiddly part again is going to be the little support brackets, these parts here 529. They're all the way along the barrier. So I'm going to be soldering this as much as I can just to get the strength into these parts. The parts for the screens or the barriers are here on fret 8, so they're all in the 540 range. These are the parts for one side, and I'm going to do one of these with these entrance doors open at the top of the accommodation ladder, because I'm going to rig one of the accommodation ladders on the port side, not on the starboard side. I want a clean side to the ship on the starboard side, but the model will be displayed looking at the port side predominantly, so I want to see the accommodation ladders just for some interest on the port side of the ship. Now there is a bit of an oddity in the Pontos set here, because we have these strips here which are the bottom ledge, if you like, of the mid-deck barrier. Goes along the edge of the wooden deck, and just inside these open doors, if you were boarding the ship, you would come to the top of the accommodation ladder and see the ship's name in a brass plate on the tread plate just as you came into the ship. The oddity in the Pontos set is that they give us two identical floor strips. In other words, with the ship's name here, both in the same direction. So this is okay for the port side, so you're looking at the ship's name as you come onto the ship. On this side, the ship's name will be upside down, so you're coming up from the starboard side and the ship's name will be upside down at that point. So Pontos have just got those mixed up. The starboard side is incorrect. It doesn't particularly matter in my case because I'm having the doors closed on the starboard side, so we won't be able to see down and see the fact that that's upside down. But we do want it to look right on the port side. So I'm going to do the starboard side first, which will be the solid screen. It's going to be easier to build rather than cut the doors out at this stage. I'll just get a bit of practice doing the easier one. And that's the one with the incorrect floor plate. So getting these parts together now. I've already made the starboard barrier up. I just need to fit the brackets on the back. But that's all soldered together. There's no glue on that at all. So it's a nice strong construction. And I'll do the port side now. So this is the side where we want to open the doors. So the way I went about assembling this one was to first of all tack the two main pieces together, solder it all the way along the top and bottom, and that gives us quite a strong basis for doing the rest of the work. We've then got the bottom strip which runs along the edge of the deck, and then on top, these are quite awkward to get fitted nice and neatly. These are strips which go along the top of the barrier. It adds quite a bit of stiffness to the part, but it's quite difficult to get fitted neatly and accurately so that it doesn't overhang at all. There's such a small connection point, it is actually engraved on the part underneath. There's a very slight recess where it hangs on the edge of the barrier, but there's not a lot to work with. It's fairly tricky. So the first thing I'm going to do is get these two main parts put together. I'm not going to cut the doors at the minute. I'll solder the parts together, but not the whole of the door, so I can cut them away and fold them back. So I've broken it anyway, being very clumsy. Just put a bit of tape on these to make sure that they line up, stay lined up. That should be enough. Just put the fan on to get rid of the solder fumes. I don't like breathing in solder fumes. You just have to be a bit careful when you're doing this. Because of the length of the part, if you put any sort of stress on the two pieces, it tends to twist along its length, which will obviously give us some problems later on. What I learnt from the first barrier was to bend these and get these soldered down, these little brackets at the top. I broke one of those off on the starboard side, and so I want to just do that now so that I don't break them. So they're nice and solid. There's another little bracket to go on the front face on the outboard side. I've got a little bit of a curve on that, but it's not too bad. So now I want to get this bottom strip attached, and I'm doing that because I want to make sure that the tread plate here lines up with the doors. So again, I'm going to tape that into position. And I want to get it located in the middle. Now you notice that there are the little slots etched into both pieces, and that's for these brackets, so they fit in all the way along the barrier. So I'm just going to start in the middle, and I'll do the end here, again making sure that the slots line up. And last of all at this other end. Okay, so that's positioned in 3 places, more or less in the middle and at both ends. And doing it like that just makes sure, or helps to stop the barrier from twisting. If you do it from back to front, it's easier to misalign it slightly, and as you go around you introduce a twist into the barrier one way or another. But just spot soldering it like that just lessens the risk of that happening. I suppose it's a bit like spot welding. And then once it's tacked in along those points, rather than adding any more solder to the inside, I'll go underneath and just run along the bottom. Okay, so I can give that a bit of a clean up now. Get some wet and dry to clean off that excess solder where I tack the parts into place to start with. I've had a number of comments from people who are obviously frightened of using etched brass. They've maybe not had much success with it in the past. You've just got to start somewhere, really. You know, it's you can't expect to pick these things up immediately and get really good results straight away. As in most things in modelling, you've just got to practice, and over time your skills improve, you learn from your mistakes hopefully, and you will get better. So I'd encourage you to stick at it. Brass is definitely an excellent medium for model ships, really, in terms of creating some of the fine detail, particularly the railings and some of the weapons and things. It's very difficult to reproduce them in plastic, although I have seen some 3D printed parts which look to be absolutely incredible and will be very time saving, and in fact I'm going to be having a look at some of those hopefully in the next couple of weeks for this model, so I'll bring you up to date with that when I get the parts. So you can see here where we've got the doors and the tread plate area. It's not fixed, so obviously when I take the doors away I want that tread plate to be exposed. So the last thing, just to get the last bits of solder out, is to go in with a fiberglass pen. Just need a refill for the fiberglass pen. I tend to get through a lot of fiberglass pen refills, and that's just because I'm probably using too much solder, so I have to do too much cleanup. So you can see maybe the reason why I didn't break the doors off. If I'd have separated these doors at this stage, it would have left this side of the barrier separate from this side, and it would have put some stress on this bottom strip here. So obviously that would have been problematic. It would have probably snapped the strip around the area of the tread plate. So this is just adding a bit of rigidity doing it like this. Eventually, of course, I'm going to have to separate the doors in order to fit them to the ship, but I won't do that just yet. So I'll put the top strips on now. I don't like doing these, they're very awkward. You can see there's such a small contact area. It's difficult to locate the parts whilst you tack it in place. Just a little tip on this. I just found it useful to stand the barrier up. That's enough. I'll give that a good clean up. These, as you can see, go on the top but face inboard, and the brackets, when you fit them, sandwiched between the bottom plate and these top rails. Okay, I think that's alright. It's a bit messy this end. Okay, I think that's okay. It's nice and strong. So I just need to fit this bracket. This is the one on the starboard side. These tiny parts are quite difficult to get aligned properly, and the positioning is fairly critical really. The bracket here, if it's slightly in the wrong place, it won't go on the superstructure. I've test fitted the starboard one already, and these brackets are a very precise fit, these here and this forward one is if it's in slightly the wrong place, the part won't fit at all. I want to fit these two brackets on the pillars, which are these parts here. So that's both the barriers built. As you can see, the port one has the open doors with the exposed tread plate inside. So I'll try and get a better picture of that. It's hard to get on video camera. But the doors are open, and the accommodation ladder will access that opening in the barrier. The rear of the barrier has all the brackets in place, and I've glued those, and that's really just because I'm not skilled enough to solder those without undoing all the other soldering work. And it's not structural at all. As long as I get these primed and fitted to the model fairly quickly, they should stay in place okay. I have soldered the brackets here and these two here, and that's because they're quite prominent, they're easily caught, and they would pull off if they weren't soldered in place. So after this had all set up, I just cut the doors down the marked line and opened them up, and I actually just tacked them into place at the back with some solder, just so that they didn't flap around. These fold lines here are very, very fragile, and they would snap off if they got bent more than a couple of times. So they're soldered, they should hold in place okay. You can see the tread plate here. Might just get it into shot, see if I can enlarge that. You can see the tread plate here with the ship's name, which would greet you on your way up the accommodation ladder and boarding the ship. So I'm going to take these over to the ship and I'll just test them for fit, especially the overall length, just to make sure that they're going to go in okay. Okay, so this is the barrier for the starboard side. When I was doing the work on the shelter deck several parts ago, I did check how much of this I cut away at the time, because obviously there was a plastic barrier along here from the Trumpeter kit which I removed, and I just checked when I did remove that, I checked it against the length of this part. I know that the distance there is correct for the etched brass part. So we just need to do a little more trimming because we've got this angle here on the aft side of this bulkhead. Just need to cut a little angle off the end of the barrier so that it fits along that bulkhead, and it might just need a tiny little bit of trimming at the front just to get a snug fit at the front. So I'll just get that angle filed off. So whenever I'm doing these sort of test fits, we don't want to take too much off all at once. Just get there gradually. So that's fine, that's a good fit now on that after end. Let's just check the front. It's actually just a little bit long, so I'll take a little bit off the front end. Okay, I've taken a fraction off that. Let's just see if that's any better. See, these parts just need to have the shelter deck lifted very slightly to get the brackets to fit underneath. I think that'll be okay. I might just put a bit of filler around some of these areas here. Obviously we assemble the barrier flat, but the hull does have a very slight curve on it, so we need the barrier to follow that line. The only other thing to do before I come to actually fix this into place, I just need to do a little bit more tidying up at the back here. So this area here, it's meant to be hidden by the barrier, but you can still see around it, and that whole junction there of the etched brass side piece and the trumpeter plastic just isn't very good. So we need to do a little bit more work on that to tidy it up. Otherwise it looks like a piece of brass just stuck on the side. And at the front as well, it's not too bad at the front actually. It's just here where we've got this. Pontos actually just provided the top 2/3 of this angle for some reason. It would have been better just going down to the deck level, but I'll just get a bit of filler. I want to get that side bulkhead relocated and some filler on this, and then I mustn't forget to put the bollard in position here, which was accessed through this hole here, and then we should be in a position to get this barrier in place. Okay, this shot shows the extent of the filler that's needed at this point. So you can see how I've added some filler to the bottom half of this bulkhead here, all the way down to deck level, and also on the inside face where the brass bulkhead joins onto the Trumpeter deck house here at the side. I've also been all the way along this brass bulkhead here at the bottom where it joins the hull, and also tidied up the join of the two screen parts and the step in the Trumpeter plastic hull here. I've also added some filler here to join this Trumpeter plastic neatly. So that's all ready for painting. It's going to need quite a bit of touch up to get it back to where we had it. Then we can fit the mid-deck barrier, and this starboard side will be done at that point. Okay, so just super glue along the edge of the side batteries, and that's gone in nicely. So I've just tapered the back here just so that it goes along the line of the bulkhead. That's how I wanted it. It's pretty good. So I'll just blow that in with a bit of the grey just to blend it. There's quite a curve on that. Now that it's fitted, it's surprising how much curve there is on the hull side. It's just going to need a tiny bit of filler just along this front edge here. It's just opening up a tiny little bit. It does look worse on the camera than it is in reality, but it does need sorting out. Just a little bit of milli put in there and fair it all in, blend it in okay. Got a nice joint at the back. I'm pleased with that, and it was worth doing the filling work on this bulkhead because it is quite visible when you can just see down behind it, and it was quite a nasty join there, so that's quite a bit better. We've got a reasonable finish at the back here. Again, I just need to do a little bit more work at the back just to close that up completely and smooth it out. Right, so I'm ready to fit this port side barrier now. I've test fitted it quite a few times to make sure that the angle at the back here matches the angle on this bulkhead. And I've got a good fit now. It's the right length and I've got the angles right now. I've also painted over the filler that I had to use to get this bulkhead level all the way down and fill the gap at the side, so that's nice now. And I've done the same at the front. One thing that I nearly forgot to do was to fit these two davits here. They're attached to the bottom rail of the barrier, and they're to rig the accommodation ladder, which will lie down the side of the hull here. So there's a large rig that's provided in etched brass from this aft davit down to the bottom of the accommodation ladder. So I'm glad I remembered to do those. They would have been quite tricky to fit afterwards. And also for this, particularly this aft one, I want to get a good fix in, so that's been soldered to the bottom rail. Right, so I'm ready to glue this barrier in place now. I'll just use some thick super glue. I want some time here to adjust this. So I hope that's enough. So going at the forward end first. And then gradually just ease it into place. Okay, that's good. I'm happy with that. I'm not gluing these pillars. I'll just leave them. They're actually quite tight under the deck. So I'll leave that as is. I'll just give a swipe of filler just along the join at the bottom later on once it's completely dry. Just to make sure that everything's set properly. But that's good. I'm happy with that result. Okay, that's all done. We've got the mid-deck barriers fitted. They just need a couple of touch-ups here and there, a tiny little bit of filling, which I'll do over the weekend. And then we can move on next week to something else. I think the next thing I want to tackle is the splinter shields around the 4-inch mountings. So I'll be doing those, and there's a couple of bulkheads to fit at the aft side of the shelter deck here. I've also got 4 gangway ladders to fit and some tie downs as well, which I'll be doing next week again on the shelter deck. So some modest progress this week with the mid-deck barriers, but every part fitted is one less, as they say. So, but I'm happy that I've got those done. We've only had a couple of days this week on the model, so it's not bad considering I've not had a lot of time on it. So next week should be a little bit better. I'll have some more time next week to get things done, so hopefully I'll be able to make some good progress. So we'll leave it there for part 23, and I'll see you next Friday as usual for part 24. In the meantime, stay safe everybody, look after yourselves, and I'll see you in another 7 days. Bye for now.